Welcome back to When Bad Things Happen to Good People, a podcast about censorship and the arts. My name's Todd Sullivan. Joining me once again is Peter Rahman.
Hello.
And today we are talking about Rage by Richard Bachman, a.k.a. Stephen King.
Hey, how's it going, Todd?
Good.
It's been a little while.
Good, it has.
Yeah.
I needed time to read. It takes time to...
It does take time to read.
Claw through the, 30, 60 pages, or...
100 and something, I think it was.
We haven't read all those many yet, though.
Well, I guess on my ebook, I'm on page 110 or something like that out of 224. So
fair enough.
It's probably not quite the same as
no, you've got like
your
twice
paper.
as many pages as me.
Right,
I'm about 130. So
yeah. Oh, total.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Pete's reading off of an ebook, and I've got the classic hardcover original Bachman books, black cover, gold and silver writing, because it's very hard to find this book. It's not in print anymore.
I looked. I went to a few different used bookstores, a few kind of like book sales and that kind of stuff, because I did feel like, my style is definitely more kind of paper in my hand, and I couldn't find it. I've got a guy out there, at one of the bookstores in town actively looking for me, so maybe a little too late now because I got the ebook, but it's still out there and attainable.
Yeah.
Maybe not so much, there's copies on eBay that are pretty expensive, and that kind of thing, but the ebook version is out there. Yeah. My struggles to find the book were a lot of driving around town, and then eventually I just gave up and said, okay, I think I got to try and track it down online. I actually did. I ordered a copy from Amazon of the Bachman books, so the same kind of one that you have, but only after ordering it did I realize, kind of looking through the notes and stuff, that people were saying, "Oh, Rage is not included."
It's the modern version that doesn't.
It's the kind of reprint after he pulled it out of publication. So I've got the Bachman books, but no Rage in there. So
Rage is a unique banning, because in most cases a ban book is one where a school board or a government has come in and said, you cannot read this. Whereas in the case of Rage, it's the author himself who stepped forward and said, you cannot read this. Mm-hmm. And it's because Rage was thought to be an influence in some school shootings.
Yeah. I think there's a number where, it was either found in a locker or at home, or there's one or two where I think someone either in the class or the perpetrator themselves said that they read the book, and that was maybe part of it, kind of thing. So there's I think there's definite evidence out there that it's potentially linked to a bunch of different shootings, and I think the 80s and early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. But when was it written? In the 70s, maybe?
Rage was published in 1977.
Okay.
It was written under the title Getting It On, which we will find out is not at all a surprise. And it was published under the name Richard Bachman. Mm-hmm. So what happened there is Rage was technically the first book that King wrote. And he tried to...
like ever?
Ever, yeah.
Okay.
And so he tried to get it published, didn't get any bites, went back, wrote some more, eventually wrote Carrie. Carrie became the big smash hit, blah, blah, blah. A few books later, King is huge. He's one of the biggest writers on the planet. He's also writing at a pace that his publisher can't almost keep up with. He's creating more books that they want to put in the market, because you have too many.
They're going to cannibalize their own book sales, yeah.
So this is where Stephen King gets the idea to create a pseudonym. And it's to do two things. One is to give him an avenue where he can publish these books that he's grinding out too fast, or these older books that, maybe didn't have life then. And it's also because he found himself questioning whether or not he got lucky with his success or whether he was actually talented enough to deserve it.
Okay.
And so his thought was, let's see if I can do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if I create a new person and start from the ground up, what'll happen.
Right.
And so that's when he published Rage. And Rage was followed by The Long Walk, The Running Man, Roadwork, and Thinner. Thinner was the last one before he was outed.
Thinner was written as Richard Bachman?
Originally.
Oh, okay.
I only think it was out for a couple of months before it came out that he was Bachman.
Oh, okay.
And it ended up being, I believe, a copyright notice on Rage that revealed it. So he had copyrighted Rage in his own name.
Oh,
All of the other ones were registered by his agent or his publisher.
Oh, okay.
So they didn't have his name on it. There was nothing to connect it to him. But I guess there was this guy who was reading Thinner, and maybe he'd read some other Bachman books, and was like, this writer's voice sounds so much like Stephen King.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if it is. And when he did his research, looked at the Library of Congress and the copyright records and saw the name on Rage and was like, aha.
And that's what set it off, eh?
And to my understanding, he called King, or tried to get in touch with King to say,
I got you.
I got you.
Figured it out, yeah.
Which is interesting that he didn't like immediately just go to the press, or like now you'd go to...
When was this?
So
the 80s?
It was in the 80s. So the first
a different time, I think.
The first collected Bachman book was released in 1985.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a different time, but still, even that's a time where you would go on like Good Morning America or Geraldo or you know, but no, he's just like he tried to get in touch with King and to say like, I know,
yeah,
and sort of they talked about what to do about it, and eventually King came out and revealed it and did interviews, and it probably was even more publicity for him, and then
the question still remains: were the books successful? Did he prove to himself that he wasn't a... I mean, obviously his career has maybe more than proved that now. But at the time.
So yeah, it didn't exactly catapult the same way that his own success did. But by the time he had gotten to Thinner, as I recall, he was selling around like a couple 100,000 copies.
Okay, so decent sales.
So not terrible.
Yeah.
And Thinner ended up going out in hardcover as well, whereas the previous four had all been in paperback. So he didn't get anywhere near the same level of success, but at the same time, his attempts at it got prematurely cut off, potentially. So,
yeah,
not an entirely failed experiment.
But not unsuccessful, like...
No.
Those are pretty decent numbers. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know kind of some of that backstory around it, because I think for me, again, as I said, I wasn't a major Stephen King kind of reader when I was younger, so to me the whole Richard Bachman Stephen King thing is kind of way past any excitement or anything very current about it. So it's like, oh yeah, Stephen King, Richard Bachman, he did that at some point in the past, and now we all know. Yeah. So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. And so the reason, of course, that Rage is connected to school shootings is that it features a character who goes into a school and shoots some people. Specifically, while there were a couple of school shooting incidents that Rage was connected to, the one that was apparently the straw that broke the camel's back for King was a shooting in December 1997 where Michael Carneal shot 8 fellow students, 3 of them fatally, at a prayer meeting at Heath High School in West Paducah, Kentucky. He had a copy of Rage in his locker as part of the Richard Bachman omnibus. King said in his keynote address at the VEMA annual meeting on May 26, 1999, "The Carneal incident was enough for me. I asked my publisher to take the damn thing out of print. They concurred."
Well, I get it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you put something out there, and, like I said, I'm not familiar with every book Stephen King's ever written, but I definitely see where he's going with this so far after reading the first half, right? It is this psychological thriller kind of book, very much in, what I know about his wheelhouse. I could see, why it'd be an interesting first book that he ever wrote, but also you get it, if people are reading this and it's driving them to, go and commit some kind of school shooting, yeah, you maybe don't want that out there in the world, especially in this kind of current day and age. 1997, internet starting to happen, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot more easier ways to propagate some of this stuff. I can see why and the publishers would want to take it out of print. But, I think we talked about this before about, censorship in the arts, where really this is probably the only acceptable version of censorship.
Oh, like self-censorship?
Yeah, self-censorship. Really the only, right? Because as an artist, it's, hey, do I want this message out in the world anymore? It's what I created, right?
Yeah.
So, it's really, that's where the authority to take it back.
There's no
really
leg
lies.
to stand on in arguing with an artist to say,
That's
like,
right.
fuck you, you need to release
print that
this
again.
book.
Like,
yeah. But it's also rare because I think most artists
thrive maybe a bit more on the notoriety. Or
I don't know if it's that, but there's the idea that, like, censorship is always wrong, right? Like, there was I don't know where this quote came from, but and I'm going to misquote it, but it's something like literature or movies or whatever has never made someone a killer. It's just made someone maybe a more interesting killer, right? Like, whoever's going to shoot up a school is going to shoot up a school. But if they shoot up a school in a way that was inspired by rage, it just means rage inspired the fact that he shot his algebra teacher first.
Yeah, it helped,
right?
Helped with the plan or something like that versus it was the major contributing force. Yeah, I mean, I see that. But the way this book is written, though, right, the kind of interior monologue that we get of the main character, he says a lot of things that, I could see that if you were potentially considering something like that, might be the, not to say the straw that broke the camel's back, but it could be something where you go, yeah, this might be doable. I don't know. I mean, I think, like you said, somebody's going to do it. They're going to do it. They're waiting for whatever impetus to push them over the hill anyway. But, if you're Stephen King and you go, well, this could be the impetus. Yeah. Maybe I don't want it out there. I get it. But, yeah. I think maybe it's time to get it on.
I think maybe it is.
Should we get into it?
Let's get it on, man. That's what it was originally titled. I wanted to read the first couple of paragraphs.
Oh, about the squirrel?
About the squirrel. Okay, no, I'm at the wrong section. Sorry. If you can hear these pages flipping, that's some ASMR right there. Chapter 1. The morning I got it on was nice. A nice May morning. What made it nice was that I kept my breakfast down, and the squirrel I spotted in Algebra 2. I sat in the row furthest from the door, which is next to the windows, and I spotted the squirrel on the lawn. The lawn of Placerville High School is a very good one. It does not fuck around. It comes right up to the building and says howdy. No one, at least in my 4 years at PHS, has tried to push it away from the building with a bunch of flower beds or baby pine trees or any of that happy horseshit. It comes right up to the concrete foundation, and there it grows, like it or not. It is true that 2 years ago at a town meeting, some bag proposed that the town build a pavilion in front of the school, complete with a memorial to honor the guy who went to Placerville High and then got bumped off in one war or another. My friend Joe McKennedy was there, and he said they gave her nothing but a hard way to go. I wish I had been there. The way Joe told it, it sounded like a real good time. 2 years ago. To the best of my recollection, that was about the time I started to lose my mind.
Yeah.
So I'll start by saying, as someone who's read a lot of Stephen King, I feel like it's no surprise that this is written by Stephen King. Like, it's not surprising that people looked at these books and eventually went, yeah, that's Stephen King.
Okay.
And that's part of the reason why I wanted to read from that first chapter, because I feel like I'm trying to stuff my book someplace. I feel like Stephen King, as a writer, who I love, by the way, has never found a literary digression that he didn't want to go down.
Yeah. And there's a few of those.
And there's a few, but I think his talent, especially early on, was his ability to go down a digression like squirrels and lawns that come right up and say fucking howdy or whatever. But then loop it back around again to like this story about his buddy, and how right around the time where that story happened was about the time he started to lose his mind. And him losing his mind is an important part of this book. But yeah, no, it's a very Stephen King.
Okay. Well, yeah, I guess I'm maybe not as aware of that, but I do think there's quite a few instances of that in the book where it's kind of these out and backs, I guess you could say, as far as how these tangents go, because they do often lead right back into a point that is pertinent to the story. So yeah, kind of interesting literary device, and they're not like, sometimes they're kind of humorous in a sense, and sometimes they're profound in terms of kind of some of the background and knowledge about the character and that kind of stuff, right? So they're very helpful to the plot, as well as a nice little diversion from the kind of current proceedings, right?
Yeah, and I find myself thinking that it gives us a picture of sort of how Charlie's brain works and how his perspective works, and it feels there's like an almost ADHD feel to the way he's narrating, and to like we're looking at a lot, at least early on, of very short chapters, like short, abrupt. Here's this burst of this. Here's this burst of this. Here's this burst of this. And it does feel like someone who's like bouncing from a squirrel to that to this to right.
All right. So yeah, chapter 1. He's losing his mind.
Yeah.
So that's, we're off to a bad start, I guess, for the rest of the students in the school potentially, right? Yeah. The title being Rage and all, it's we know things are not looking up here. So chapter 2, I think he's still just kind of watching the squirrel during algebra.
He talks a bit about stomach issues.
Yeah,
I've difficulty keeping his
got
breakfast
IBS
down.
with a question mark at this point in the book, because I'm kind of like, what's going on here? Is it stress, or is it, he just kind of has this condition? And
I feel like there was a period, sort of in the 80s, maybe 70s, maybe 90s, where there was this association, right or wrong, I have no idea, between like psychopathy and nausea. And I don't know whether it's, like people who were like crazy in that way are also anxious and whatever in ways that would upset their stomach, or whether it became
the physical manifestation of these broken thoughts.
But I just remember reading a number of things where like somebody who either was already like a mass murderer or was about to become a mass murderer would complain about nausea or feeling ill or whatever. I don't know if it's connected to that or if
Interesting. So chapter 2, the big thing here is he gets called out of class to go to the office. I think he's kind of that's pretty much it, right? And the chapters are pretty short.
Exactly.
So we kind of keep moving along here, right? So chapter 3, he's walking to the office, but he's got to go to the bathroom. His stomach is now unsettled, right? As opposed to chapter 1 when it was kind of it was fine. So he's got his little Ritz crackers.
Yeah.
He's got a little diatribe there about how everyone can hear what you're doing in the bathroom. It's no secrets in there. And
I have, it took me a second to actually place this part of the story, but I have reminiscences about panties.
Yes, I have that too. Thinks of Sandra's panties.
Yes.
I got that note because he has this little aside about, when he was at the dance there with Sandra and her button came undone.
Yeah.
And he could see her good girl panties, right?
Right, because they're white.
White, her good girl panties, yeah.
Against her flat stomach.
That's right.
Yeah.
Rippling as she danced. This is not foreshadowing per se, but Sandra is in Algebra 2.
That's right, you're right.
We will kind of not hear too much from her later, but she's kind of in the mix.
Oh man, I forgot about that, and now it makes me wish I was. I would be reading her character differently if I knew that she was the underpants character.
Yeah. Well, because she is still. I think he mentions later on that she is a good girl, right, compared to maybe some of the other girls in the class. The last thing he does in the bathroom, he kind of looks in the mirror and he's looking pretty rough. He's got circles under his eyes,
big dark circles under his eyes.
And, just kind of all intents and purposes looking kind of rough. And so he writes, he was going to do some longer graffiti. And after seeing how rough he's looking, he just sticks with a quick eat shit, which somehow he breaks his pen and then he heads to the office. So
you can't go wrong with the classics, can you?
That's right, yeah. So, then he gets to the office and he's got a nice little thought about the typewriter room, which is next to the office, and how it's all never quiet. And but I can't remember, what does it remind him of? I can't remember. I didn't note it down
I don't have
here.
a note. I'm sorry.
No, but it reminded of some other ceaseless racket or something like that. Yeah. And yeah, one of his dad's buddies is
Al.
There. Yeah.
Selling textbooks. And it's a little awkward between them.
Yeah.
And it's you're kind of the first hint, I think, other than what Charlie said himself, that he's becoming something. He's going through something. He's maybe ill. He's maybe, I don't want to say deranged, but like
people are scared of him.
People are scared of him, and Al is as well.
Yeah.
Al, he's selling textbooks.
Well, we find out. I've got this note. So somewhere in their discussion, I think it's more internal to Charlie, but we find out he had some kind of incident with a teacher, and fucked him up pretty good.
Yes, with a pipe wrench or something. Yeah.
So that is why Al's maybe looking at him a little funny.
That's true
and
too.
Little concerned, right? Because he's definitely now got that reputation of being maybe a little unhinged.
Yeah, and there's that sort of shadow over things, because even up to as far as we've read so far, they've not covered that story. No. There's been a few hints towards it.
Like we read to chapter 20.
Yeah.
And there hasn't been really much, like it's hinted at, right? And you kind of know, there is a spot where we find out that it was fairly serious, right? The guy was in the hospital and all that, but
talking about picking bits out of his brain or whatever.
Yeah. But we don't really know what incited it or what the circumstances around this incident were. We're coming into this story as far as getting it on in a major way rather than whatever that incident was with the chemistry teacher. But it's been 2 years coming in a sense, right? He's been losing his mind for a while, but people are now suspicious, right? His dad's friends, the principal, people are giving him kind of the side eye and are wary of him. So it's out there now, even though maybe it's been a slow build. But even through the first 20 chapters, we don't really find out too much of the background, so it's still a mystery.
It's
which I like.
Still hovering over it, So as he's waiting to see the principal, and Al is madly attempting to avoid communicating with him, he drifts into memory, and he has this memory of going camping with his dad, and Al.
Al was there, a bunch of his dad's buddies.
And in this memory, he wakes up in the middle of the night. He's in the tent. Takes a minute to sort of orient himself and know where he's at. He has to pee wickedly.
Like real bad, yeah.
But he's also, his dad and all of his dad's buddies are all drunk. They're all sitting around the fire. And he is 9, I think, about this time.
He's 9, yep.
And he's scared.
Yeah, well, they're loud.
They're
carousing.
loud.
They're telling stories that are
fucked up.
Yeah, a little fucked up. Like he hears some shit about what do they call it? The Cherokee nose job.
The Cherokee nose job. So
that's pretty scary when
they get talking about what they would do to their wives if they had an affair, or to the person that fucked their wife if they had an affair. And Charlie's dad tells the story of the Cherokee nose job, which is where he takes a knife and you slit the nose of the offending female. I don't think I put down the exact quote.
Well, it's something like, so she'd have a vagina on her face.
Basically, yeah. So
they know what got her in trouble.
Everyone would know what got her in trouble.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's pretty problematic definitely by today's standards. But there's this kind of already this hint of aggression, of anger, of whatever in Charlie's dad.
And fear from Charlie. Charlie is definitely afraid of it. Maybe not so much in terms of the content of their story, although I'm sure that would be traumatizing to a 9-year-old, the Cherokee nose job. But just he sees the shadow of his dad holding up a knife, right? His dad unsheaths his knife and is waving it around. And so, you're a 9-year-old kid, you just want to go take a piss, and your dad's drunk waving a knife around talking about cutting up noses and whatever, and cutting off bits of the offending man.
Oh, absolutely,
right? You cut off the genitals of the guy in the scenario. So, you're a little concerned, I think, as a 9-year-old. So Definitely this flashback focuses in on the first hints of that relationship he has with his father, which we find later is kind of a driving force in a sense.
And it's also not a great relationship.
Yeah, exactly. So that's our first blush at it, and it's, not maybe the best picture.
Exactly.
And we start to get at that understanding of, why he's afraid, at least, right? Or if there's fear that's driving him partly,
So he does manage to sneak out of the tent. He takes his whiz. He comes back into the tent. Snaps back to present day. Gets called into the principal's office. We learn that Charlie has been in some amount of therapy. Has been talking to a psychiatrist.
Yes, Dawn Grace.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like and this is all connected to what you were talking about, the whatever happened with that science teacher.
Yeah, apparently the principal tells him that John Carlson is the science teacher, and he'll be back to school in a month. So he's out of the hospital. He's still recovering. So this was quite the beating.
This was a big deal. Right? This was serious. Yeah.
And he was in a coma or something like that for a while. And but he's on the mend. He'll be back to school in a month. So, and I think it's not explicit, but the principal does tell him that he's got the report, from Mr. Grace, the counselor, the school psychiatrist. So, like, there's been an investigation. He's just been going to school. He hasn't been suspended that we know of, right? But this is kind of the hey, we've got the report, now it's time to talk about it kind of speech with the principal.
And it's not sounding great. Like, they want to send him to Greenmantle or whatever it is.
Reformatory school, which, back in the 70s, 60s, reformatory schools were still like, that's, kids are getting beat.
Yeah.
Right? Like these are places where, you hear horror stories of, soap in the socks and, kids getting really messed up and like hardcore places, right? So you can understand why any kid would be a little alarmed at having to go to a reformatory school. But Charlie seems to have kind of made his peace with going to reformatory school. He's kind of, whatever you want to do, like, I'll take it, even though he seems to have another plan in mind.
Yeah, I think he's made his peace with the inevitability of whatever's about to happen, including what happens later.
Yeah. Well, even the fact that he's saying like that's when I started to lose my mind early on. And it comes up even in his discussion with the principal where he asked the principal outright, like, you can't handle me. Like, how do you think you could even handle me? So he knows he's outside the constraints of normal society or normal psychology. Like, he's realized that he doesn't fit in. Right. So part of that, I think, is accepting that, they're going to send me all over the place because I'm not going to fit here or into a regular school.
Yeah. I did find myself wondering whether or not, if he hadn't been called to the principal's office, if they hadn't had this confrontation, would everything that came later have still happened?
I mean, that's a good question.
It feels like this conversation with the principal where he flips and all of a sudden he's aggressive. He's throwing shit at the principal. Like, that's the first moment where he really begins getting it on.
Well, I mean, I think part of it, though, is that there has been an other incident, right? So he has lashed out before with the chemistry teacher, right? So that break is maybe already in progress. So I think, similar to our discussion about why the book was banned, right? This is an inciting incident for sure, but it was going to come no matter what. Sure. I think, right? Like, he's brought the gun to school. Oh, sorry. Spoiler alert. Right? He's brought a gun to school, right? Like, he's going to do something at some point, whether this conversation happened or not, right? But this does kind of kick it off. And it kicks off kind of the psychological aspect of the book, because he really flips the script on the principal.
Yes.
And he really gets after the principal psychologically, right? He kind of breaks him down, talking about panty raids and, like, talking about his schooling and how he's been as an educator. And
he's been a deviant too.
Yeah. Right. And he's really, and, we see this later on in the book, like, he's really good at twisting people and at getting them to break, in a sense. And that's kind of part of what's driving him to get it on. That's part of getting it on.
Yes, exactly.
In his kind of terms is playing these games with people where he really gets after them and needles until they break and that kind of thing. And it starts right here with this principal who thinks he's, just delivering this news to Charlie and then gets kind of fucked with.
Yeah.
And then Charlie really gets him at the end of this conversation.
He unzips his pants, pulls out his shirt, and comes stumbling out of the office declaring, did I write it down?
Basically that he tried to rape him.
Yeah, he tried to rape him.
Yeah.
I wish I'd had the quote there. But he basically accuses the principal of trying to rape him. The principal comes out and is just speechless. He can't...
Because what's he going to say?
Charlie has gone so far beyond the norm that this guy just cannot... He's just flapping his gums.
Yeah.
And Charlie just is he wanders off to his locker.
Yeah.
Where
he tucks himself all
back
as he's walking away.
My work here is done.
And he's happy with himself, right? Which is kind of part of this, his idea, that we don't fully have it yet, but he has this thing called getting it on, which is, it's fucking with people, it's doing whatever, and he's starting it, right? And he's feeling good about himself. He's like, all right, I'm getting it on. I did this with the principal, right? He couldn't say shit. He's walking away all happy with himself. And you're right. That was the thing that now he's like, all right, now we're going to do it.
Now it's time for phase 2. Yeah. We're going to keep getting it on.
So time to stop by his locker.
Yeah. He rips up his books, throws them in a garbage can.
I think
at the bottom of his locker?
Just at the bottom of the locker, yeah. He's got some ratty gym clothes and stuff.
Ratty gym clothes.
Lots of kindling type items.
But it was, I loved this bit, and I didn't write down what it was, but he talked about how he ripped all of his textbooks in half and how they were so easy to rip, except for this one specific one. Yeah. And it made me wonder, because Stephen King did work as a high school teacher for quite a while.
Oh, did he?
Before he was a published writer. Whether or not he just knew something about which textbooks were harder to fucking destroy. If that's a fun detail that was snuck in there. I don't know. I like to pretend it is. There's a rotting an apple core that's turning a nice shade of brown.
Yeah, that he was kind of almost saving
right
as a little experiment. And then this is where we also find out that he's got a box of ammo in his locker.
Got a box of ammo and a gun.
And a gun, right? And these are the right shells, right? He switched out the shells that were originally in the box for the shells that are going to go with his dad's gun. So we know he's got the ammo and the gun, and we know he just set fire to his locker. We know it's on. It's on, right? It is now on.
And also got a note. He brings his padlock with him.
Right. Yeah.
And his conversation with the padlock is one of my favorite things. I can't remember the name of the brand, but it's it's Titus. Titus, the helpful padlock. And he's picking it up. He's like, Titus, you fucker, you old cockknocker.
Yeah.
And it's, again, those are some very Stephen King-esque phrasings of things.
But also kind of fits in with the youthful psychology of it, right? That he would,
and also
have this little conversation.
This crazy
with his padlock,
guy
right?
who's just hanging out with his historic padlock. We go way back, me and him.
Yeah.
And he pops it in his pocket.
Yeah. Well, he throws it away first.
He does.
And then he does. Oh, Titus, you shouldn't be in the garden. He takes the lock back.
Titus, come on, man. You and me, we got history. So he brings it with him. He leaves his locker blazing. There's this.
Well, he shuts the door, so the fire is kind of smoldering in the locker, but smoke is already starting to kind of come out of the vents at the top, and his name tag is starting to peel away, or you can't see the letters anymore. There's a good fire going in there.
Mm-hmm. But he's got the gun. He's got his padlock. He heads off.
Yeah, he's going back to class. Yeah.
Opens the door, walks in. The
Chapter 9.
Chapter 9. I did not write any of these chapters down. I have weird breaks just to sort of show the rough progress of things, but the chapters were too short for me to make note of. They were,
yeah.
He walks in. The teacher is something
kind
about
of mid-lesson.
Yeah, something about when you change the variables, the axioms remain the same. Yeah. She turns to Charlie and asks him if he has a hall pass or an office pass.
And he does. Not the kind of pass she's expecting.
He takes the gun out of his pocket, shoots her in the head, and...
Which, cinematically, I think, not that I'm, condoning school shootings or anything like that, but hey, do you have an office pass? And go, yeah, I do. And he pulls out a gun and shoots her. Cinematically, I could see that being kind of a cool scene. And I get why he kind of wrote it
And
that way.
I'm now foreseeing this podcast eventually inspiring somebody to do that exact shooting, which means we would have to pull this podcast
We're gonna have to pull this down. Yeah, we'll have to self-censor our podcast that talks about censorship. Oh, the irony! But yeah, so this is the first kill of the book, right? He shoots his algebra teacher, and it's kind of stunned silence. Right?
Yeah, he remarks that like if somebody in that moment had screamed something like, "Oh my God, he's going to kill us all," there'd be this stampede. People would have overtaken him,
and he wouldn't have gone through with anything.
Exactly. Yeah. But instead, there's this weird silence, and he's able to just walk up to the front of the class. He like kind of kicks the teacher's feet out from under the chair.
Her feet are in the way of him sitting down comfortably at the desk. So he's got to kind of shove the body over.
And so he sits down and is like, hey, everybody.
Yeah.
Let's get it on.
Yeah. Like, hey, I'm getting it on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is kind of another aside where he gets into now, right? He starts talking a little bit about, society and how, logic and sanity are not too far away from, and I didn't write many quotes down or anything for this, but he goes on this little tangent of, that the worst of us, or the people that are not normal, are not that far away from the logic and sanity, right? And even he himself, he describes himself as a perfectly sane guy with just one wheel that's gone wonky or something like that, right? So it's this weird aside where in that moment of, really getting it on now, I mean, the stuff he's done up to this point, he attacked a teacher, he set his locker on fire, right? Nothing that, is not going to potentially be overcomable. But now he's murdered a teacher, right?
Yeah.
He's in it now.
Next level.
So now he's thinking about kind of what got him here, I think, right? And that's what this little aside goes off on. And then he kind of relives this moment in his mind a little bit, and he talks about the roulette wheel and how that moment where the ball is bouncing, right? Anything could happen.
Anything can
right?
happen.
And that's kind of the moment that he's living in right now, or that the class is living in. Is that they're waiting for the ball to drop, right? It's that anticipatory moment of not really knowing, and he even says that he kind of still to this day thinks that moment is still going on, right? in some sense, right? So like he's never really left that moment, which I thought was kind of an interesting take on it.
Yeah,
because he's clearly, pardon me, the tone is that he's looking back on this. From kind of, he's made it through and he's looking back at what had happened. That's the kind of sense of the tone from the storytelling perspective. So to say that he's still kind of in that moment and it's that profound for him as to where things could go was really interesting to me. But yeah, nobody does anything.
Yeah. Nobody
in the class, right? I mean, I don't know in the 70s how prevalent school shootings were. Probably not really prevalent.
I meant to actually Google when like the first kind of real school shooting happened, and I didn't. But yeah, I mean, when I went to school in the late 70s, early 80s, and I don't remember it having been a thing.
Well, we also went to school in Canada.
That's true. That's true. So there could be smaller. Yeah, exactly. There could be smaller. Yeah. I mean, exactly, because once it's big enough, it will bleed into the country, right? Yeah. But a smaller shooting might not.
Yeah, right. And most likely, and again, just pure speculation here, earlier school shootings were probably beefs with other students rather than I'm going on a murderous rampage, just going to kill as many as I can kind of thing, right? Like that's what I would imagine. Even this book, in a sense, right? He's really kind of got a grievance more against authority rather than his fellow students.
Yes, exactly.
Right? So it's more, he took out the teacher.
It almost feels like the teacher is like a necessary casualty.
Yeah.
To his end goal.
He needs to get her out of the way.
Yeah.
To fuck with more authority.
To get it on.
Right. Yeah, and he tells the class. He straight up tells the class, hey, this is me. I'm getting it on. We're getting it on. They don't really know what he means per se, but he's essentially announcing to them that he's going to be fucking with people. That's what's going on. And this is death number 2, I think.
Yeah, so
fire alarm goes off.
Fire alarm goes off. People are running around out in the halls. Panic, chaos. No one really knows what's going on. There's a teacher who pops open the door of the classroom that Charlie's in to say, like, evacuate, get out of the school, something's on fire.
And he takes a shot at him.
Well, first of all, he's just like, get out.
Yeah.
And, of course, the teacher isn't listening to this kid. He's like, come out, Charlie takes a shot at him.
Yeah, and he misses.
Misses, pings off the corner of the door frame. The guy still doesn't leave.
But the teacher almost doesn't, I think they said, like, he doesn't really realize he's been shot at.
Yeah, I
right?
mean...
He just momentarily, he's kind of like, here's a noise, but... he's in this kind of teacher mode of like, I got to get the students out, and that's, like he, getting shot at just doesn't even fit in with that.
But you got to think that this is at a time when people didn't get shot at in schools, there's that. And also, from everything I've heard, and I don't know if I've ever heard an actual gunshot, but from everything I've heard, it's actually quieter than you expect it to be.
It's pretty loud.
Is it?
Pretty loud.
Okay, well, then I'll cut this bit. Cause
we'll go out shooting sometime.
Okay, sure.
We're bringing ear protection for a reason.
All right.
But pretty loud. But I think just the fire, the alarm's going, so yeah, probably not as noticeable.
Yeah.
With all of that going on. But I think the teacher mode of like, I got to herd the students and we got to do this. So he gets shot at, doesn't even hardly faze him. And then he just launches back into, hey, we need to get, you need to get out of here. And then shot number 2.
Hits him in the throat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's some great visual descriptions here by King talking about like how it's like a ripple in the water.
Yes, the visceral kind of impact of the bullet.
Spreading of it as he goes down, gurgling.
Yeah, no, I think very well there's a good mix here of the internal monologue of Charlie, as well as some really interesting descriptions of the exterior world.
Yeah.
And yeah, very, very good contrast there of, we get Charlie's, all his thoughts and these tangents of, his kind of wild thinking, but some real interesting descriptions of what's happening physically while this is going on, which is really, really cool. So now he's got another teacher down.
Yep.
And at this point, I think he gets
Ted.
Is this Ted Jones?
Yes, Ted Jones to get up and close and lock the door because now he knows people can just come in here and interrupt our attempt to get it on.
He's trying to get it on.
Yeah. So Ted, close and lock the door. And this might not be the first. This probably isn't the first reference to Ted, but it might be the first time that like Shirley asks Ted to do something. And we're starting to get this hint of there's a tension between Ted and Charlie.
Yeah, I don't know if it's later on where we get, but Ted is kind of the golden boy.
Yes.
Of the school, and I don't know if he's mentioned that or not, or if it just happens right at this moment in the book. But yeah, Ted is kind of the, the typical kind of popular jock, perfect, all-American boy.
But in the jock regard, it's important to note that at some point, either here, slightly later, or slightly before, we mentioned that he was like a big, huge, like he was going to be a football star, and then had to leave.
Well, he quit the team.
Said
football wasn't for him.
Exactly.
He can do other shit.
Exactly.
With his time. Yeah.
But there's also this hint that maybe there was more to it, right?
Yep. And then I've got a little note here that Sandra, so Panty's girl, kind of ends this chapter with her little quote saying, "It's like the end of the world." So like it's starting to maybe dawn on the students a little bit because they've been sitting there in kind of stunned silence. They don't know what. Like they just saw their teacher get murdered. Charlie's kind of sitting up at the front of the class, lecturing them about it's time to get it on. There's fire alarms going off. Like there's panic teachers. He shoots another teacher right in front of them. Nobody's really said anything yet, right? He's just kind of sitting up front of the class with his gun, kind of holding court with these stunned kids. And then Sandra, of all people, is the good girl. It's like the end of the world, right? Which maybe for some of them it might be.
That's the thing that I kind of love a little bit. That feels a little bit quaint to me, because it's like in the post 9/11, where like people around the world watch the planes flying at the World Trade Centers. This seems like such a minute end of the world. You know what I mean? And it does.
This is still the generation that would be fresh from World War II.
That's what I'm saying. It's
Vietnam.
like it's kind of adorable that we're reading this story from a time when that could be what the end of the world was. Mm-hmm. Right? We're so much more fucked up now.
Yeah, that's
right?
True. Yeah,
that's my point.
So then we get into why Charlie thinks that the kids didn't flee or didn't say anything.
Yeah, okay.
Right? And he kind of has this little aside about how, and I think he does say American children rather than children in general, but they're so accustomed to violence, right? So from the news, from films and TVs, and, you know, they're even in the schoolyard, right? Like, you know, you're getting beat up at recess or whatever.
Yeah,
like you're seeing violence, you know, at that time, I guess, you know, more common for schoolyard fights and that kind of stuff. And then, you know, you got to think the time would be, you know, Dirty Harry movies and stuff like
mm-hmm.
that in the 70s where, you know, they're seeing this violence and they're just used to it, right? So when it starts happening in real life, you know, their brains are kind of going, oh, this is just like a movie. Like, It's not really happening to me. It's not that immediate thought of like fight or flight isn't happening because it's so tuned in with entertainment that they're seeing on a regular basis. And that's kind of what he attributes everyone's willingness.
Well, it's not just entertainment, though. It's also like the casual cruelty of the children of the era. Mm-hmm. Like I think the fights on the playground, the casual...
They live with violence in
They
so
live
many ways.
with violence, yeah. Which I think is just a result of growing up in that era. And that's, again, like where this is really a story of its time. I don't know that there's that same kind of... Maybe it is. I have no idea.
Yeah. The other thing I like about this is that he does mention that he thinks they also might just be curious about who will be next, right? Like there's that, oh, he shot Mrs. Underwood,
right.
He shot the other guy,
right.
Mr. Vance. Who's going to be next? Like, what's he going to do? Like there's this anticipation of like, well, this guy's going off the deep end. What's he going to do? Like, strap in, give me some popcorn. I want to find out, right? And so I think that coupled with the real life violence in the schoolyard, plus the entertainment violence, right? It gets them wondering like, what is going to happen, right? There's just that natural curiosity more than the alarm and the fight flight kind of reaction. And then there's also, we hear fire trucks and ambulance in the distance as well. Mm-hmm. Now the fire department arrives. They start kind of setting up on the lawn in front of the school, all within view of the window, right? Like
they're watching.
They've got a great view. Charlie's got a great view of whoever's approaching the school, right? He can see there's one police car so far. The fire trucks are there. Like he can see everything that's going on outside. So they're not really in the best position for, you know, if they're trying to enter the school, kind of, you know, approach him with the element of surprise. But yeah, so he can kind of see. They've got all the other students are out on the lawn. They've been evacuated from the school. But in the classroom, everything is kind of calm. Like nobody's really saying anything. Nobody's freaking out. Charlie tells them, yeah, you guys, you know, do whatever you want. Like, you know, just nobody go,
relax,
nobody go to the door. Yeah.
If you want to like go sit next to your best friend, whatever.
Change spots, right?
There's a few people, like one of them sparks up a cigarette. Somebody else like stretches out and relaxes.
Yeah. They're having a decent enough time. And I don't know if someone asks him kind of what's going on or something like that, but Charlie does say, I've got this little quote where he just says, well, I guess I'm going berserk.
Yes.
You know, like, what?
Yeah.
Hey, what are you up to here, Charlie? Like, what's your plan?
That's a great line.
I guess I'm going berserk.
Right. Yeah.
It's almost too cool and sane sounding to really
fully
capture what's happening. Right.
My next note is that the principal comes on the intercom.
Mm-hmm. Which I don't know too many
Charlie
schools
down.
that have two-way intercoms in every classroom.
That's interesting, right? Yeah.
I don't think that's a thing anymore.
No, probably not anymore.
But at the time, we do find out that the intercom can be switched from talk listen to just listen only.
Which again is an interesting moment. This is again, I don't have too many details about this conversation, but it's very much a Charlie pushing back against authority. Mm-hmm. Charlie pushing back against the man.
That's
kind of a thing.
Well, I mean, he's already broken down. So it's the principal that chimes in first.
Yeah.
and Charlie's already fucked with him, right?
Yeah.
He's already
Yeah,
kind of
exactly.
broken this man a little bit already earlier in the morning. So he's got the upper hand already in this conversation, and he kind of just continues to take him down a bit of a peg, right? By, you know, he call him by his first name, making him, because the principal would call Charlie Decker, like his last name. Hey Decker, what are you doing? You know, don't call me that, right? Call me Charlie, right? And I'm going to call you Tom, and just.
Oh, I think it's a little bit later.
No, it's part of this conversation here where he says,
right.
I'm going to call you Tom.
Oh yeah, okay.
Right? Where he's taking out those societal constraints of authority and teacher student, and he's just, hey, I'm going to talk to you as an equal, or even you're beneath me in a sense, right? In terms of how he kind of plays around with these conversations. So, but yeah, he does roll call, right? The principal wants to know who's in the class.
Yes.
So he takes out the teacher's list and starts reading the roll call, and there's one kid absent.
And the principal is like, you know, is he dead?
Yeah. No, he's just sick
He's
today.
just sick today. He's got measles or something.
Yeah, very interesting. And so more police are showing up outside, and he, you know, the principal is kind of saying, well, they're gonna, you know, come after you, and then Charlie's like, nope, you know, no tear gas, no, not go tell him to stay away, or I'm gonna shoot somebody, right? You know, and so he definitely, he's obviously taken 2 lives already, so there's some seriousness to that, yeah, there's some conversation here. I've got some notes about how he's you know, trying to get across the point that for the principal, he needs to understand the difference between people and files, and that he's not doing a good job of that understanding, even though he's been an educator, right? That he doesn't understand that people are more than just a file and that kind of thing. And
I really think that in those moments, in moments like that, and also other moments I'll mention in the future, but this is where the book is at its best. Mm-hmm. Is it's these concepts of the students versus the authority almost like treating the students with contempt, not seeing them as people, seeing them as numbers. These are interesting conversations to have about the kind of systems that we have in place with schools and with school administrators or whatever else, right? And I think these are the moments where I would have an argument for seeing this book in publication.
Yeah, there's lots of very interesting aspects of not even, you know, why are you following this kind of cookie cutter conversation with your students? You know, why can't you treat them as people, right? It's an interesting kind of concept that, as you just said, right, it's worth that discussion of, if we take away the inhumanity of it, or the, you know, hey, this is just a person in a file, they, you know, they have good grades or they have bad grades, or they, you know, messed up, or, you know, there's black marks or whatever, but hey, what is this person going through? What are they feeling? And I think that's part of why Charlie is getting it on, right? Mm-hmm. Is he feels that he's never been understood, or that, and I think he even says it to the principal that, you know, you can't understand me, right? And as maybe a mark on being so cookie cutter and in that bureaucratic authoritarian kind of sense where you can't really treat people as people, right? It's just not part of the machine. And yeah, I definitely agree that part of this book pokes a lot at that.
Yeah.
Right. And definitely worth talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So there's more stuff here with Ted, right? Charlie's kind of keeping an eye on Ted Jones. Ted is starting to act a little wonky here, right?
Well, so are we off the intercom yet?
I think we're off the intercom, right?
Yeah. So we're off the intercom, and so I wanted to mention, because you brought this up yourself, there's that moment where they need to talk amongst themselves, and a kid is like, "You mean like where they can't hear us?" And Charlie's like, "Yes." And he mentions, "You got to turn off the intercom."
Yeah.
And this is the first moment, I think, where it feels like the classroom is either on Charlie's side, if not on his side, at least like wanting to see how this plays out.
They're giving him some rope to play with. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is a moment where Ted Jones is a little bit pissed off, because he's like, "Why would you do that?"
Yeah.
And again, it feels like Ted Jones is the one who is like the only one who wants this to end.
Yeah. or wants it to end violently, perhaps, like, to take Charlie down.
In that sense, yeah.
Right?
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think he wants to end it in violence just for violence, but yeah,
No.
he would like to see Charlie taken down.
Yeah, everyone else
for
is
sure.
more along for the ride, for sure. And,
Yeah.
hey, if it ends, it ends. But yeah, Ted Jones is, like we said, he's kind of the golden boy, right? I think we get the hint that he fancies himself maybe a bit of a hero, and certainly later on we kind of see that. And then I do have a note here that aside from Charlie keeping an eye on Ted Jones, I can't remember, I didn't write down which, but there's a girl in the class, because they ask him, a few times why he's doing this and what his plan is and that kind of thing through these chapters. And then there's a girl that pipes up here and says, well, maybe it's your parents. Right?
Yes.
Maybe that's what's driving.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads us into, now he's going to start talking about his parents.
Yeah, this is the next bit of conversation.
And he just really opens up about
Yep.
it. Like he frankly tells the class all these stories about his parents, right? It was
Yep.
really interesting and kind of cool and honest. This guy who's just shot some teachers is like, yeah, this is what happened with my parents when I was a kid.
Maybe
really
it's your parents who
interesting.
made you do that. And he's like, yeah, maybe it was.
Yeah.
Here's this story about the creaking thing.
I'm going to tell you this story, and then you can kind of determine if it was my parents or not.
So we get to the story of the creaking thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's Charlie thinks he's about 3 years old.
Yeah.
In bed, he wakes up. It's dark. There's like a full moon. There's like the fingers,
the classic
of,
branches.
on
the
shadows
window,
of the branches of the window. And he hears this creaking thing moving down the hall.
Yeah.
And at first he thinks it's coming for him.
Yeah.
And then as it goes past his door, he thinks it's coming for his mother.
Yeah.
And his father. And then he hears.
Well, he realizes that the creaking is in his parents' room.
Yes.
Yeah. And we kind of figure out a little bit what the creaking noise actually is. So his parents are kind of going at it.
Right, yes.
But it's not going particularly well.
No.
Right? So we hear kind of, his mom say, like, I don't care that you didn't finish or something like that.
Yeah.
Right? Get off me. I'm done. I'm going to bed. Right? And then this is, that little remark from his mom who, she got what she needed.
Yeah, exactly.
Going to bed. It associates for Charlie that his father is the creaking thing.
Yes.
Right? And I mean, we know that relationship is not great to begin with, even though he's still rather young at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But now he's got this nightmarish entity associated with his father on top of everything else. So we know that's not really going to be all that healthy for the relationship.
Yes.
Right? So anyway, he's just told the class this whole little story about, how he was young and, now he kind of hates his father or thinks he's a monster. And they're, again, kind of like stunned silence. Like they don't really know how to process these stories.
Like almost immediately after, we get the story of Charlie and the storm drain or the storm windows.
The storm windows, yeah.
Yeah,
there's a little aside about more cops and stuff showing
Yeah.
up, and he gets Ted Jones gives him the finger.
Oh, that's right.
Right, and it's like shit, like you little fucker or whatever. So Ted Jones is kind of losing his mind.
Yeah,
a little bit,
yeah,
too.
that's a good point. They're losing their minds mutually at each other
in
almost.
kind of different ways. Yeah. But yes, then after that, then he breaks into the other
The
story.
storm
Now
windows.
he's 4, I think.
4
for the storm windows.
His dad is like is preparing to put the storm windows on the house, and
It's what you do in October.
it is.
Yeah.
If you don't do it, I don't know what's wrong with you. And so his dad is systematically going through and like taking all the windows out and laying them against the house and getting everything all prepped. And there's just something about the day and the sun and how everything looks.
It's a beautiful October day.
Beautiful October day. No better day to break a bunch of fucking windows.
Yeah. And I like how premeditated he is about it. Like he goes to the road, right, to the shoulder of the road in front of the house, picks up, loads his pockets up, like he loads them up with the ammo, right?
Yeah, until it looked like there's like a couple of, what is it, fucking...
ostrich
eggs.
Like that, yeah. That his pockets were full of ostrich eggs, right? Waddles back over to the house. We don't really know what's going on with the dad because he's not kind of anywhere around the windows. And yeah, it just kind of he struggles at first, right? He misses.
He misses the first time.
Misses the first shot. And then
I think
he
it's a
gets
little bit closer.
Yeah.
Refocuses.
That's right, yeah. But he gets the game going,
Yeah.
right? He starts breaking. He's got a ton of ammo. He's breaking all
One by one,
right,
going
just,
window to window.
And who knows what his dad is doing? Because, like, you know,
That's a good point. I never even thought to ask that question.
I mean, his mom's in the house playing piano, which is, I guess, loud enough to kind of mask the noise. Because
Bach, by the way, very important. It's
and
Bach.
At one moment, you know, he's at the window near his mom, and he kind of, you know, sees her, and they wave, and like, so obviously she hasn't heard anything, right? And yeah, so he kind of gets around, and he gets to the very last window, and suddenly Dad is back.
Yeah,
and he's not super happy.
No, comes barreling at him, yelling something, picks him up.
Yeah, picks him up weird, like he
grabs his ankle and the arm, and then just fucking throws him at the ground.
And hard. Like, he describes that it was so hard and knocked the breath out of him. And like,
every time I read that section, I remind myself, like,
it was like a wrestling move.
It was, but I remember as a kid, like, getting my breath knocked out of me at times. It's not a thing I do as an adult, which I'm grateful for, because I remember feeling like I was about to die as I had my breath knocked out of me. But like I can feel that. Having been there, I can feel that experience.
Yeah. But I don't remember at 4, like older in.
Oh yeah.
Right? But I'm at 4 years old, getting that kind of physical kind of trauma, right? Like definitely would be. You wouldn't know how to process it, right? Which he doesn't. I mean, he can't breathe, right? He doesn't really know what's happening. He's shocked, and you know, he doesn't cry or anything immediately, right? Because he's still in so much shock.
Because he can't breathe.
Yeah, well, and he can't breathe. Yeah. But eventually, you know, and I think his dad's kind of still yelling at him.
Well, at first his dad's like, "Oh my God, it's okay, it's okay.
I didn't mean to," or something.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. But then once he starts screaming, as soon as he's screaming, and the mom can hear, and Dad knows he's in fucking trouble. Yeah. You little shit, whatever, shut up. Mom comes out.
Oh, and Mom comes out, and she's also like in kind of a very revealing outfit. Like she's just wearing kind of a slip or something.
Yeah,
like
kind
that.
of. It's,
like,
I don't know, like a.
I imagine like a sheer kind of see-through-y kind of nightgown type.
Yeah,
thing,
exactly.
Right. And so like she's essentially out in the neighborhood, and so you know, Dad is like worried about what the neighbors are gonna think. We also already know what he would do, right, to somebody looking at his wife, right? He's got the knife.
Got the knife.
So anyway, he's worried about that. He wants to still beat the crap out of the kid. He's mad. Hey, he broke all the windows. Mom is intervening, right? She's, no, I'm going to take him inside. You know, he's going to have hot chocolate or whatever, and we're going to talk about it. And he's like, don't you dare do that. And so there's this confrontation now between, you know, Mom and Dad.
And she sends him away.
Yeah, and she kind of puts Carl, Charlie's dad, in his place a little bit here. She, you know, kind of gives him the what for. Tells him, I don't care what you do, go drink with your buddies or something, but get the hell out of here. And she kind of lays down the law a little bit and takes Charlie inside. And then Charlie tells her that Dad lied.
Yes.
Right? Because I think Dad says like, oh, he was already crying just out of fear when I caught him.
Yes.
Right? But he tells his mom, no, he hurt me pretty bad. He threw me on the ground. And, right? So now there's this whole thing.
But he also mentions how powerful that made him feel.
Right? Because he got to throw his dad under the bus a bit there.
Yeah.
All right. And then he almost tells the class another story. Right? He's got this little story about this time his friend swallowed a mouse.
Right.
And then threw it up. Right? His friend's mom came up because she saw him swallow the mouse and is like, you know, put her hand down his throat. He threw it up.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about this was his got a little note there about when he threw up the mouse, looking at the vomit, and then the mom threw up too, seeing her kids throw up. But he's got this thing about the mouse didn't look so bad
against all the other vomit.
Right? So it's this thing of like this nice by comparison, right? And in this crazy situation in the classroom with the dead teacher, and you know, and then we have these little moments where he's interacting with the class, right? We get this whole kind of other meta version of nice by comparison,
right?
His conversation.
We just had a really ugly conversation, but compared to everything else,
that's right. This is actually kind of nice, right?
Yeah.
So he doesn't tell that story though. That's just internal.
Yes.
About the nice by comparison, and then this is the point where our golden boy Ted Jones
decides to try to disarm Charlie.
That's right.
Yeah.
So Ted is he's making a stand. He stands up.
Yeah. He's like,
and this is where I think Ted messes up. He tells Charlie what he's going to do. Right?
Yeah.
He's like, I'm going to come there and take that gun away from you. And, he's trying to maybe threaten him or, I don't know, intimidate him a little bit or something like that. And Charlie, now we know, right, his getting it on is about fucking with people and messing with people. And he kind of stops him in his tracks because he asks him kind of out of nowhere, like, hey, why'd you quit the football team? And this like just breaks Ted's mentality, because then we kind of find out the story of why he quit, because another kid in the class whose mom is a bit of the town gossip told him all about it. So Ted's mom was an alcoholic and, had to go to detox or, had to dry out or whatever. And Ted had to help with that. And he was forced actually to quit the football team, right? So,
forced in the sense that he had no other choice.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. But I mean, what he presented to the other students was, hey, I'm doing this because I'm too cool for anything.
Right, exactly.
Right. But secretly, right, it's these kind of, dark family secrets that nobody at the time really would want getting public, right?
And this is where the other point where I think Rage is really interesting is in this whole sort of like high school drama side of things, right? Mm-hmm. Like, everybody in high school is terrified of kind of being outed for whoever they are, whatever that means. Everyone has secrets. Everyone is trying to like keep who they are private.
Or at least some parts.
Private, exactly. Yeah. And there's gossip about it. There's who's this, who's that, and the way that this story is about kind of forcing or encouraging these people to out themselves. And that's where that Ted doesn't want to do that. And we'll see kind of soon in other characters kind of willfully out themselves.
Yeah.
Ted doesn't want to.
The situation itself, I think, lends itself to the students wanting to discuss. Like, there's several points where students that are normally maybe quiet or more reserved are saying things or speaking up. And I think the fact that, Charlie is doing what he's doing is maybe giving them license or maybe the comfort that, hey, this is a crazy situation.
Yeah.
I might as well do this thing or talk about this thing, right? So, yeah, I think there is that aspect of, well, whether it's because it's this little mini end of the world or whatever it is, right? That there's, hey, I better get this off my chest.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. If I'm going to die, which I don't think the students are really processing yet at this point, but maybe there is subconsciously that kind of, well, if I'm going to die, I got to get stuff up, that kind of confessional.
I think to me, it's more the getting it on environment that Charlie has created.
Right.
Is allowing this kind of temporary reprieve of
judgment.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. This is where Ted loses a lot of points with the class.
Yes, he does.
So, the guy named Pigpen, whose mother is the town gossip, kind of explains everything.
Yeah.
And Ted kind of, talks a little bit about it and, kind of ends off by calling his mom a drunken bitch, which nobody in the class takes very well. So now whatever favor, Ted has had with the class, he's kind of lost it, right? And everyone's kind of giving him sour looks. Even one girl gasps at him calling his mom a drunken bitch.
Yeah.
And so he's been taken down several pegs, and he kind of just shuts up at this point, right? Whatever wind he had in his sails to try and take Charlie down, he's lost it. And he's kind of lost maybe the support of the class here, right? And yeah, it kind of fades into silence. Ted is defeated, and then the intercom rings again.
Yes. This is Don Grace, right?
This is Mr. School Psychiatrist himself. Yes. What is the Don for the love of his grace or something like this, school counselor. And apparently he's kind of a bit of a hotshot school counselor. Like Charlie describes him as a stud or something that. Yeah. He's the guy who gets kids to break. And so Charlie, I think, he's out to get this guy, right? He's like, oh, this psychologist guy, I'm going to fuck with him, right? Like this, I think for him is a lot more significant than breaking the principal,
Oh yeah,
You know,
yeah.
This
Principal
is-
was easy.
Yeah, Principal was easy. This is the guy who
Yeah.
he's like, well, he's the psychologist. This is what he does, but I'm gonna get him right. And yeah, I mean he lays into him. You know, like this is one of the neatest things in the book.
I love this chapter
You
so
know,
much. I
it's-
love this chapter so much.
The rapid fire
Yes.
kind of conversation
So
here.
so basically, what Charlie does is he says to Dawn Grace, he says, because Dawn is trying to ask him questions.
Yeah.
And so Charlie is like, you're not going to ask me any questions. In fact, if you ask me a question, if you say something that's a question,
If you ask anything that
I
even
will
seems
I
like
will
a
shoot
question,
a person.
Yeah.
And
also, Charlie then starts asking him questions,
Yes.
and he says, "If you lie or I catch you in a lie,
I will kill
shoot
someone."
So there's now this pressure on Mr. Stud
Yeah.
psychiatrist here to really play this
And
out.
this is again a moment where we get another reference to let's get it on.
Yeah.
Then we lead in this chapter, and the whole chapter is nothing but this kind of rapid fire
Yeah.
Q&A session between Charlie and the psychiatrist.
And
Starting
poor
with
psychiatrist, I mean, he never stood a chance.
no, God,
Really.
no,
Like,
no.
Charlie, for whatever reason, I mean, he is great at breaking people down. He knows just where to pick, where to poke. He's got this master plan that you kind of see develop. Like at first, you're just thinking, oh, he's just trying to mess with him by asking him questions about this and that and trying to catch him in a lie. But then you kind of see where it's building to, and he's had this plan from the start, and it's brilliant.
Yeah. And so he starts by asking Dawn about his military service.
I think he first asks him if he's eaten out his wife.
No.
or not. No, that's not.
That's
first.
about
military
like the
service.
military service, and then have you ever eaten out your wife?
Yeah, and then has she given you a blowjob?
Yeah.
You know, and he's trying to play it off like I don't know what that means.
Yes.
Like
And he drifts between these questions of like your military service, your work history, and like has your wife ever gone down on you,
Yeah.
and what's that mean? And first of all, Dawn admits that apparently he's never eaten out his wife, which bad move, Dawn.
Yeah.
Not cool.
not cool. But also, he seems to have never gotten a blowjob either. So I don't know what's going on with that.
Yeah,
whole
Dawn,
marriage
I'm sorry.
In the
It's-
70s. Poor guy. Maybe that's why he's poured so much of his life
Maybe
into
he
psychology.
is. Did people just not like have? I love the way when Dawn is like, I don't understand what that means. Charlie rephrases the question to, have you ever had oral to genital intercourse with your
Yeah,
wife?
like
That was a great phrase. Like
Yeah.
I just loved that.
Well, I think the thing about that too is that Charlie not only because he asked him a lot about his military service and training and that kind of stuff, and so I don't think we mentioned it, but Charlie's dad Carl and all his friends, they're all veterans. They all fought in the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
So he knows a lot of the military terminology, but also we get a sense that he's very bright because his description of oral sex. It's all very clinical terms, right? He understands a lot of this psychological kind of stuff that he's going to be met with from the psychiatrist. He already knows that playbook a bit, right? And it's really interesting because he's really armed with a lot of knowledge that I don't think the authority or the machine or the people he's trying to fuck with can really fully appreciate. And it really is helpful for him in getting under this guy's skin and fucking with him and getting it on.
And so, as he goes through this list of questions, he's sometimes going back to questions he asked before to make sure he gets the right answer again, playing tricks like that. He starts asking him biblical questions.
Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting because I'm an atheist. I thought it was interesting, this expectation that somebody would just happen to know these biblical questions. Like, the things like, is Jesus counted among the martyrs? I'm not even sure I understand what that question means.
No, and I mean, I grew up in a church, and I'm not sure what exactly that means. I didn't grow up Catholic, so that maybe is more.
Well, and that's the thing. Like,
I guess.
I think his answer was something like,
Yeah, but
and Charlie
he
makes
first
a note
asked
about
him
like
what his affiliation is, and he's a
Methodist, yeah.
right?
And
So-
Charlie's comment on the whether Jesus was counted among the Methodists was like, he's too Methodist to be sure.
That's right. Yeah, he doesn't know if he's one of the martyrs or not, right?
I don't know what any of that means.
I mean, really, like, Jesus was the ultimate martyr, right, within religion. So
right, but I guess within certain religions there is an official title of the martyrs that maybe. Yeah. I guess the argument that might be that Jesus was removed because he was the ultimate martyr.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. So
there's saints and prophets and martyrs and all sorts of different classes of individuals within these religious sects for sure. But yeah, I mean, really interesting how he really goes back and forth and gets him very comfortable with being honest, right? Which I think leads into, how he gets him or how he traps him with this line of questioning. He's going back and forth so often, checking for lies, right? That he's got this counselor in this mode of, well, I need to be truthful, right? I gotta say what, the answer is, because he's checking me, right? At one point, he kind of stumbles about the year he did his military service. He says 1956, 1950, and then one time in 1957, and he kind of trails off, and he's like, "Oh, wait a minute, was that a lie?" And right, so he's just on edge about any answer that he gives.
And Charlie is so willing to go from like 1 to 11 in these things. Yeah. You fucking lied! You fucking
and he cranks it up. Yeah. So we've got Don in this really truthful position, right, where he's going to answer, if he knows it, he's going to answer as honestly as he possibly can, because he knows what, he's got students' lives riding on this. And this is what leads Charlie then into his kind of biblical related question. So he asks him,
what did Jesus say on the cross?
What did Jesus say on the cross? Which was in the form of a question, right? Yeah. Jesus asked his father, "Why hast thou forsaken me?"
Yeah.
Right? And
Charlie's like, "Oh, isn't that a question?
Wait a minute, what did you just say?" Right?
And Don's like, "Oh, that doesn't count. You fucking cheated." And Charlie fires into the floor.
Yeah. But we don't... obviously, Don doesn't know that.
No.
He hears a shot. And then, on top of it, Pigpen, the kind of fainty kid...
falls slump.
At the same time. So you hear a gunshot, and Charlie isn't sure if the intercom picked it up or not, but essentially there's a gunshot, and then the thud of a body hitting the floor. So, for all intents and purposes, what this psychologist has heard is... he was in this rapid-fire battle of wits with Charlie.
And he
fucked it up. He heard a gunshot. He hears a body hitting the floor, and now he's broken. Charlie has won this round.
Oh yeah,
and he starts sobbing.
He sobs for like a minute straight at least before he's like, "I was just fucking with you."
Yeah. Like just the fact that he even, I don't know. Maybe it's part of him lording it over him that he got him.
Yeah,
but. Yeah, because it is a small amount of grace to Mr. Grace to say, "Hey, no, you didn't just get a student killed, right? It was just a joke. We weren't playing for keepsies." He says.
Exactly, that's what he says.
This was just like the opening round, right? But the game's over now, and then he gets Ted to confirm that nobody's dead.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, essentially, he's broken this man, and then he kind of runs out onto the lawn. He's done. He leaves.
Yeah.
Oh, and Charlie wouldn't let him leave either. Right, at first when he wanted to leave, but now Charlie's like, "Yeah, go ahead, and run out to tell everyone what happened," kind of thing. It was pretty intense.
Yeah,
right?
no,
and I think we understand as much as Charlie's had these in-depth, either flashbacks or conversations with the class about his parents and why he's doing this and that kind of thing. We see that he's pretty sharp. He's got a bunch of knowledge. He knows how to get at people in a way that no matter almost who it is, he has this path to how he's going to break them, kind of thing, right? So we start to appreciate more the danger that Charlie possesses psychologically, rather than just he has a gun and he's not afraid to use it and set fires and that kind of thing, right? He's also dangerous, going up against these mind-to-mind battles with authority as well.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we're at, and then this is kind of the last bit, chapter 20. We get into the chapter I call the Dis Slap Battle.
Yes. And I think this is a really interesting chapter because this is where we shift from the majority of the classroom kind of being along for the ride to like...
starting to participate.
Starting to participate.
Starting to get it on.
Yeah. So when Charlie gets off the intercom with Don Grace, one of the students, it's a
Grace
student called named Grace, is like, "Fuck yeah, man!"
Yeah. She's like, "That was great, Charlie."
That was great. And there's another student named Irma,
Yeah.
who kind of speaks up and starts like, "What the fuck, Grace?"
Yeah, she's perturbed by this whole situation,
Yeah.
and she's like, "What are you talking about, Grace?" And then they get into it a
Yes.
little bit, right? There's some insults that are
Grace
thrown.
starts like basically stating, if not implying, that like, Irma starts implying that Grace's mother's a whore,
Yeah, and Grace also a slut or a whore
or a slut in training, right?
Yeah, yes, the classic slut.
The classic slut in training.
And Grace responds by attacking Irma's kind of appearance.
Yep.
Right. Oh, you're fat and ugly, or whatever it is. You can't get a date or something like that.
Yeah.
So they start kind of, they're going after each other.
And so Charlie's like,
Well, Grace stands up. So she stands
That's
up.
right, that's right, that's right.
And she, I just picture like, the classic, like she starts taking out her ears.
yeah.
Gonna
fuck you up.
Yeah. And she's coming, like she's walking
And
down
Irma's
the
like,
aisle.
no.
Yeah, she's coming down the aisle at Irma. And then Charlie intervenes.
Yeah.
Right. He goes, no. We need some order here. We're going to do this right.
And so he gets some chalk. He draws this chalk circle in the ground that's about 5 feet from corner to corner.
Yeah.
And is
Those
like
famous circles with corners.
Yeah, of course. And then is like, get in the circle. You cannot step outside the circle or you will die.
Yeah.
And then
Which Ted objects to, but is quickly kind of silenced.
Right, because again, like, this is where the majority of the school starts getting it on.
Yeah.
And Ted is like the only naysayer.
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting dynamic where, realistically, looking at this from an objective perspective, Ted is objectively in the right. He is the one who's like,
he's thinking
this is
about this
fucking
clearly, like,
insane.
we need to stop this. It's crazy, yeah.
But the rest of the students are in for it. And I kind of feel like if I was in that classroom, I would be too.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think, going back to that comment that Charlie had about the violence in everyday life, in entertainment, that kind of thing, right? And as well as what you were talking about before, about the hidden parts, right, of the high school life where I don't want you to know about what my parents are doing, or, I secretly am this, or, I'm a nerd or whatever, right? There's this liberating aspect of it. They don't feel, I think, as though they're in danger. Like Charlie specifically told them, hey, I'm not going to shoot you guys. Like, I don't want to hurt you guys. I just want to get it on. Fuck with the man kind of thing, right? So they don't, I think, feel in danger specifically from him, right? And they're now in this almost out of body.
But realistically,
experience.
they should. Like,
they should.
How much should you trust the person who just shot your algebra teacher, right?
But
like,
at the same time, nobody was really too perturbed about Mrs. Underwood going down. Like, they were kind of like, all right, like,
things could be worse.
Yeah, algebra 2, not my favorite class. I don't know what it was, right? But I think there's that comfort in the sense that it's a crazy situation, and they have received kind of some assurance that they're gonna be okay. Mm-hmm. Right? They don't feel that they're in danger. So that willingness to kind of live in that fucked up moment, right? That roulette ball that's just spinning, right? It's a moment outside of time almost. And that comfort to just progress down that road of, well, I can let my secrets out. Like Charlie told these stories and nobody judged him, right? So there's that comfort there, I think. As well as, you got beef with other kids in the class or whatever. Now's your time to get it out, right? Like, it is a little Lord of the Flies-y in this classroom really now. And Charlie's doing a good job of kind of saying, yeah, like, you can do this, but let's do it with some order. So, he gets them in the chalk circle. He throws out some rules. Like, okay, this is a thing. You guys are going to lay into each other, and then, it's going to be open hand only. Like, he's got all these rules. Like, you get a good diss, and then you can do an open hand slap, right? So he lays out the groundwork, says, don't step out of the circle, or, I'll shoot you kind of thing, but, go at each other, right? Settle this, as the proper way of settling this disagreement between them, right? And then they get into it. They start going after each other, right? We got your mom's a whore, you're a whore on one side from Irma, and then Grace is coming back with, you're fat and ugly, you stink, you can never get a date, right? You got no friends, you're a nerd who stays at home. And each time they kind of lay out their little diss, Charlie will nod like, yep, that was good.
Yep.
And then they get to slap the other one, and there's some pretty big blows happening there. And I think they go 2 or 3 rounds. And then
And Irma starts breaking down. Irma's like, I can't. But she doesn't give up.
And Irma, though, we kind of find out she's kind of bigger. Like she's got kind of the height and reach advantage. Like, you know, from a physical perspective, she should kind of be winning this battle. But she, I think, psychologically didn't maybe have the heart to do it.
Well, I think she feels the insults more than the other girl does.
Yeah, because she's probably heard them more, right? It's mother and town gossip was maybe out there a bit more. But yeah, so Irma kind of, she falls to her knees and is kind of, hey, don't hit me. I don't want to, I'm done. Like, you know, and Grace keeps coming after her though, because she's like, you need to apologize.
But also Charlie supports that too. Like, you know, if you got to either apologize or you got to like see it out. Mm-hmm. And so even after Irma's like, please stop, please, it goes back a couple more times.
Yeah, Charlie still gives Grace the nod, like, yeah, go ahead, you know.
And it's just a matter of waiting until Irma will say that she's sorry.
Yeah, which she does.
She does finally.
Grace lands a few more shots, and then Irma breaks down and says, "I'm sorry."
Yeah,
but then she also kind of, you know, Grace has won, so Grace leaves the circle and is like,
well, no, but first, this is I thought was a really, really important moment where before she leaves the circle or whatever, Grace is like, my mom fucks, and I love her.
Yes.
So she acknowledges,
cheers.
Right? She acknowledges all of the things that like she was accused of, and says, you know, I love her anyway. And
but not that she's a slut or a whore.
No.
Just that my mom fucks.
My mom fucks.
Right. Like my mom.
That doesn't make her a slut. Doesn't make her a whore. But she fucks.
Yeah. So kind of changing the narrative a little bit.
Sure.
Right. So yes, these were insults, but yeah, my mom is doing her own thing, right? And I'm proud of it. Whatever. She's out.
And the class encourages Irma to kind of do the same thing. Like,
well, Charlie, when Irma stands up and is, you know, Charlie's like, do you have something you want to say to the class? Right. We're in this kind of confessional environment.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So yeah, Irma does bare her soul a little bit, right? She also says these things are true, right? Yes, I don't know how to, you know, perform proper hygiene, right? I don't, you know, I'm not getting any dates. Like I don't know how to do it, and she's sad, and you know. And then some girls pipe up and are like, well, hey,
it's not that hard.
Yeah, have you thought about, you know, shaving your legs and doing this and that? And all of a sudden, these group of girls in the back of the
class, on back here. We'll tell you how to, pretty yourself up.
Well, I think they start doing it, and then the boys are kind of listening, and they're like, no, okay, come back here, because these are trade secrets. Like, we're not going to tell it in front of all of the class kind of thing. But so she's immediately accepted, right? So now Charlie has kind of won over the class, essentially, right? His methods are working. Right, people are feeling comfortable. They've been confessing their stuff and being accepted for it, and making new friends almost.
And the bigger picture I like about this is that it does feel like the things that people pick on you about in school are the things that are probably true to some extent, right? Yeah. And it's your own denial of them and your own unwillingness to own up to them that makes them weaponizable.
Yeah.
And as soon as you step up and say, yes, that's true, it can't be used against you anymore. It loses its power, right? Yeah. Exactly. And again, this is where I think rage is at its best, at its most powerful, is those moments with what it means to be a high school student.
Yeah.
Right?
And to be in that environment, that machinery, that... it's almost a separate society within high school.
It
right?
is. It so is.
And so, how do you play within those rules, and how do you buck those conventions too, which is part of getting it on, right? Is bucking the convention. The other thing here is Ted tries to get involved a little bit, right? You know, he's saying, "Oh, don't do that, Charlie," or something like that. And there's somebody else in the class that is like, you know, shut up, Ted. Like, so now it's not just Charlie. Like, somebody else is like, what are you doing, Ted? Like, shut up. And, you know, like, because everybody's liking this, right? They're feeling free. They're feeling accepted.
Even if it's not fun, it's at least cathartic.
Yeah.
Right?
And so Ted is now kind of just really lost any favor that he's had with the class, any attempts of being the hero. Like, everyone's against Ted now. Everyone's on board with Charlie. You know, he's doing it right as far as getting it on, right? And then the other thing I found interesting, so at the end of this chapter, there's a little kind of timeline thing here where it says it was 9:05 in chapter 1 when he was looking at the squirrel and got called to the office.
Now it's like 9:55.
It's been 45 minutes. Yeah. That's all it's been. And it seems like there's been a lot that has happened, right? He's been to the principal's office. He started the fire. He's shot 2 teachers. The police have showed up.
He's done a bunch of getting it on.
Right? He's messed with the principal over the intercom, who didn't like that, and then he left. The psychiatrist has been on the intercom, right? And this has only been 45 minutes. I find it almost hard to believe, to be honest, that it was that compressed.
That is my thought when I hit that part too, where it was like, I wanted to go back and look at it all and be like, is it conceivable this could have happened in 45 minutes? He stopped in the
bathroom and took a shit on his way to the office. Well,
I don't think he took a shit.
Or he took a piss. He ate Ritz crackers.
He ate Ritz crackers.
Graffitied. He was in the bathroom for a
while.
Most
people eat Ritz crackers for at least as long as he would take a shit
But
for.
He had to wait for the principal, right, before he had that conversation.
Yep.
He had to go rip up the textbook, start the fire, right, and then he killed the teachers. And how is that 45 minutes, right? He's telling these stories, and even the slap battle, that would have taken a bit of time to get through. But anyway,
what, you're right, and I think it's a structural writer thing where it's he wanted to use the alarm and the shock of the bell going off,
right? Because that's why he knows what time it is.
Yeah, because the bell goes off. It's the class bell, and he just couldn't find a place to use it earlier.
Yeah.
So it's just got to be there. So it's just,
Yeah. But yeah, so that is the end of chapter 20.
Yeah.
Which for me is page 110 of my little ebook, which I think for you is page 60.
60 something, yeah.
Yeah. And so essentially halfway through the book. And I'm really curious where it goes, because it seems like a lot has happened. Granted, at the end here we find it's only been 45 minutes.
Yeah.
But I'm curious where this goes. I mean, the police are amassed outside. He's broken down the principal. He's broken down the counselor. Who's next? Is there going to be a police negotiator, or, how are they going to come after him? Right. Is he going to toy with the class some more? Is he going to eventually, are they going to revolt against him? I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's really interesting kind of how he's going to keep getting it on. Right. Because essentially he's fucked with the authority figures in the school already, and kind of accomplished that. He's kind of got the class on his side, but then what's he going to do, right? He's just going to sit there with them until they get bored or antsy or turn against him. I don't know. What are your thoughts? What do you think's going to happen?
Well, I mean, I've read this before. So I know what's going to happen. But it's been interesting to revisit. I haven't read this in a long time, and it's been... I was wondering how it would be to go back to it, to see how it stood up, how problematic is it in the current climate. I still think it's really good.
I mean, it's extremely well written.
Yeah.
From that internal monologue perspective, we really get a lot of what makes Charlie tick. We don't get a lot of details about some of the events and things, but these little flashbacks and pieces of memory that he has about his relationship with his father, we really start to get this picture of, how he could be messed up, or how he might be going berserk and lashing out at the world. Just really, really good kind of internal thoughts and stories. But also the time frame, it's in the 70s.
Yeah.
Which is, for us, that's a different time.
Absolutely.
World, right? Especially in the States, in a rural school, this is a whole different world, right? I mean, you're still people still might have black and white TVs at home and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
It's just a different time in the world. And some of the language, I think, reflects that. Not that it's problematic or anything like that. I didn't find anything really too out there as far as, things that we would deem as problematic nowadays.
There was a bit where Charlie played Negro slave, and the other black kid or a black kid in the classroom.
But I think the fact that he laughed at it was he's cool with it kind of thing, right? That was kind of one part. But I think the fact that the kid in class laughed was kind of calling it kosher, I guess. But I mean, it does definitely has some language that is, not common parlance anymore. Right?
Getting it on. Well, it means something different now, I guess. But yeah, just some of the little, kind of things that he talks about, especially with his dad and that kind of stuff, right? Where, people don't really talk like that anymore. But
it's still interesting as far as how that dialogue goes.
Happy horseshit is one of those phrases that I've seen Stephen King use more than once that I have never heard in person.
Yeah, nice. But yeah, I mean, it's a cool kind of psychological thriller.
Yeah,
really, and I think this was a good chapter to kind of pause on because he's got the class on his side now.
Yeah,
right. He's kind of got the police and the authority at bay. Right. It's his show. Ted is cowed in the corner. He's not doing anything.
Where do things go
next?
What is
going to happen? Yeah. Right. Like, how is it going to end? There was one other thing that he says in this chapter near the end where he goes, somebody's gone, Mrs. Underwood, right? He's looking at her, and she's gone, and I'm gone
too.
Right? And we don't know if that means he's going to maybe kill himself, or, he's got no hope for his life, or whatever, or he's just gone berserk, or...
Yeah, I took it as meaning his mental state. Like, at this point, he's gone. He's not
I took it
sane.
more as, because he was looking directly at a dead body, that he's kind of forfeited his life, and this is, this getting it on is the grand, like, I'm doing this, and then I don't really care what happens, kill me or not, or whatever. I kind of took it a little bit in that sense. So that's why I'm curious what is going to happen. Like, is this, because the tone of the book has been him looking back at this.
Yes.
Right? As if he's telling it like he's survived.
Some years later,
recounting it, right? But is he, or is that just kind of a little bit of a writer's trick kind of thing? Right?
Yeah, because, I mean, in literature, a story could be told by a dead person looking back on their life as well, for sure, yeah.
So I'm curious to see, like, and also I think that we know people in the class are probably not going to survive. He's definitely seems to have it in for Ted. The other thing with the slap battle, like, if you step outside the circle, you will get shot, right? So there is if you cross me, or if you don't follow my rules or what I want, there's a potential to shoot him. I know he doesn't want to.
Yeah, but
lose the class.
Even that, and that's an interesting point. I feel like he wouldn't have, but it was just in the same way that, like,
threat?
Huh?
You think it was an empty threat?
I don't know if it was an empty threat or just something he said for fun in the moment. I think about, when he mentioned to Don Grace, you ask a question, I'll shoot somebody. And then he tricks him into asking a question, and then he shoots into the floor.
Yeah.
Because he's not interested in killing anyone right there. That's not his goal.
Well, he's maybe not interested in killing his classmates, per se. He definitely had no compunction about taking out two teachers, right?
Well, his argument was that, like, he had no choice. He had to, in the sense that they got in the way of his attempt to get it on.
Yeah.
And while I think that's a fucking insane thing to say, I also find myself kind of able to put myself into his perspective and see how that might be true.
He has some logic, I guess, to how he's thinking about it. Whether we agree or not, I get it.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean... I know you read the book, so you're kind of humoring me here a little bit, but I feel like he's, he kind of has to lose the class at some point, and, there's got to be some back pressure that causes him to shoot someone or do something where he loses the class, right? And things will then escalate from there. Right. I don't think, as much as we've seen the class kind of be on his side and, oh yeah, Charlie's doing it right, and, shut up, Ted, let Charlie, do this. That can't last, right? There's no way that can last. I mean, these kids are, I guess it's only been 45 minutes, right? So
far.
But what happens when, hunger starts to kick in and we need bathroom breaks and the real life physical needs start to kind of happen. The sweating, we saw one girl sweating and
and non-spoilery, but I do think that more time passes in the second half.
Yeah, okay.
More than an hour passes.
Yeah. I mean, for, 20 chapters, it's pretty compressed timeline, that's for sure. I mean, a lot has happened. But yeah, for me, I'm just really curious because it could go a whole bunch of different ways. Maybe nobody else dies. Who knows, right? Maybe he just fucks with authority for the rest of the day and everyone walks out at the end. Like, there could be a lot more of those rapid fire conversations, which would be really interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm very curious to see what will happen next.
Well, we'll find out in a couple of weeks when we cover the second half of Rage by Stephen King. Until then, I guess we're kind of done our conversation for the day. Yeah. So I've been Todd Sullivan.
I've been Peter Ammon.
And until next time,
go read a fucking book.